Let's begin by looking at some of the key terms and phrases used when talking about the writing process. When thinking about evidence-based writing instruction, some of the most important terms to know include the writing process, pre-writing, writing, revising, editing, and post-writing. First is the writing process. To provide evidence-based writing instruction, we need to have a solid understanding of the writing process itself and how the research tells us to guide our students through it. When thinking about writing, some people view writing as the words on the paper, the finished product. However, to get to this finished product, there are certain phases or steps that happen in the writing process. Depending on who you talk to, these steps vary slightly in what they are called. But in this course, we will use the terms shown on this slide. The main idea I want to convey to you about writing is that writing is a process that involves many steps, and each of these steps has sub-steps. It involves much more than just the finished product. Donald Murray, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and longtime teacher, described the process of writing by saying, "What is the process we should teach? It is the process of discovery through language. It is the process of using language to learn about our world, to evaluate what we learn about our world, to communicate what we learn about our world. Instead of teaching the finished writing, we should teach the unfinished writing and the glory of its unfinishedness." Before we start looking at the first two phases of the writing cycle, pre-writing and writing, please take a moment to jot down a few notes in response to these two questions. How do you get your students to start writing? What are some techniques and strategies you use to begin the writing process with your students? I will pause for a minute to give you time to respond. What you have just done is brainstorming, a pre-writing activity. You can use this type of activity with your students to help them generate ideas or expand on a writing topic. Brainstorming helps students to focus as they begin collectively and individually thinking about a topic. Diagramming or clustering students' responses in a word web during or after a brainstorm can give students a visual organizational structure through which they can see the connections of ideas. Let's take a closer look at the first stage of the writing process. Murray notes that pre-writing is everything that takes place before the first draft. Pre-writing usually takes about 85% of the writer's time. In pre-writing, the writer focuses on a subject, spots an audience, chooses a form. Pre-writing may include research and daydreaming, note-making, outlining, or title writing. During the pre-writing stage of the writing process, with the topic already given, students working alone, in pairs, or in groups should be encouraged to name and write down any ideas that come into their minds. It's important that teachers not put any pressure on students during this process, and instead support them in getting out whatever it is that they have in their heads about a topic. In this way, teachers can help students experience the full process of discovering what they're trying to say. The brainstorming activity you did was one pre-writing strategy. You can use brainstorming with your students to help them generate ideas like we did, or to expand on a writing topic. Diagramming or clustering student responses in a word web gives students a visual organizational structure through which they can see the connections of ideas. For example, if a class were talking about school and the instructor wanted to cluster school, the instructor would write school in the large circle at the center of the diagram. And she or he would ask, what are some things or people related to school? The class would respond with students, teachers, computers, desks, classwork, etc. The instructor would fill in each circle with one of those words, modeling for students how to use this graphic organizer. We want to try to help students be as creative as possible in using pre-writing strategies. What works for one student may not work for another, so it is helpful for instructors to try several types of pre-writing strategies with their students. Pre-writing work can also appear to be very disorganized and unstructured. Neatness is not what matters. What is important is that the instructor encourages students to generate concepts and ideas, and then to circle, highlight, and draw lines to show connections between them. Whatever students need to do to get them thinking about the topic and making connections is what they should do during pre-writing activities. Then it's the teacher's job to guide students to make sense of their pre-writing and to help them go through the evolution of moving from pre-writing to the next step in the process. The next stage in the writing process is writing. As students begin to write, they can use the ideas and organization generated in the pre-writing activities to guide them. Even with these tools to help them, it is important that they understand that they should not put pressure on themselves to initially produce a single, perfect vision of their work. Instead, teachers should stress that it is expected that writing is a process in which students learn along the way, and that they will also create a second, third, fourth, or even more drafts before they get to the final draft of their work. Nevertheless, it is important for students to produce a first